The credit report slapped me like a court summons. 340. My name, my life, destroyed before I could even drive. The teller's whisper cut deeper. Family fraud. I lunged for my car, but the process server's grip locked me against the hood. His papers burned in my hands, my aunt's notary stamp on a foreclosure I never signed. The woman who taught me to read had just stolen my future, and she wasn't done yet. The fluorescent lights of the Columbus branch hummed with a low, electric vibration that rattled Maya's teeth. A scent of stale coffee and industrial lemon cleaner clung to the air, thick enough to taste. She smoothed the front of her thrifted blazer, her fingers catching on a loose thread at the cuff. Across the polished mahogany desk, the bank manager, a man whose name tag read Mr. Henderson, tapped a gold-plated pen against his blotter. The rhythmic click-clack echoed through the sterile glass enclosure. Maya had come here with a simple goal: to open a modest savings account, a small step toward reclaiming a life that felt like it was slipping through her fingers. "I'm sorry, Miss Sterling," Henderson said, his voice as cold and flat as the marble floors in the lobby. He didn't look up from his monitor. "The system is flagging your application. We cannot open an account for you at this time." Maya felt a prickle of heat climb her neck. "Is there a problem with my initial deposit? I have the cash right here." She reached for her waterproof backpack, the one filled with accordion folders. But Henderson raised a hand. "It's not the deposit. It's your credit report." He finally turned the screen toward her. The numbers were bright red, bleeding into the white background of the digital document. 340. Maya's breath hitched. A 340 credit score was more than just bad. It was a death warrant in the modern world. It was the score of a person who didn't exist, or worse, a person who had been systematically dismantled. You have outstanding balances on 4 luxury car loans, 3 defaulted mortgages in Florida, and a dozen high-interest personal lines of credit. All of them are currently in collections. "I don't own a car," Maya whispered, her voice cracking. "I've never even been to Florida. I work at a bookstore. I take the bus." She stared at the screen, seeing her name, Maya Sterling, attached to debts that totaled more than she would earn in a decade. The realization hit her like a physical blow to the stomach. Someone had stolen her identity, and they hadn't just taken her money. They had buried her alive under a mountain of paper. Henderson sighed, a long, weary sound that deflated his chest. He signaled for his assistant, but a younger woman in a bank-issued vest stepped forward first. Sarah Johnson had been watching from the next cubicle, her eyes wide with a mixture of pity and professional alarm. "Mr. Henderson, I can take it from here," Sarah said, her voice gentle. She waited for the manager to grumble and retreat into his inner office before she turned to Maya. "Come with me, honey. Let's go somewhere quiet." Sarah led Maya into a small, windowless side office that smelled of scorched dust and high-end air purifiers. The air was so thin, it made Maya's throat feel tight. Sarah sat behind a smaller desk and began typing rapidly. The clicking of the keys sounded like a hail of pebbles against a tin roof. "I've been looking at the history of these flags," Sarah whispered, leaning in close. She smelled of vanilla and hand sanitizer. "Maya, this didn't start last month. These accounts, the first one was opened 15 years ago. It was a college fund that was drained and then turned into a revolving credit line." Maya's mind raced back to her 11th birthday. She remembered her father, David, sitting her down and telling her she was a partner now. He had guided her hand as she signed a series of documents, telling her it was for her future. She had felt so grown up, so trusted. 15 years? Maya asked, her hands trembling. She reached into her bag and pulled out a blue folder, her fingers tracing the chronological tabs. I was a child. Who could do that? Sarah looked down at her shoes, then back at the screen. The Social Security flags are internal. To open these kinds of accounts for a minor, you need a guardian signature and a physical birth certificate. Whoever did this had your original documents. They had your life in a drawer. Sarah's voice dropped even lower. It's usually a parent, Maya. Someone who knows the numbers by heart. The air in the room suddenly felt freezing. Maya thought of her father's silver hair and his cold, calculating eyes, and her mother's theatrical sighs over the cost of pearls. The betrayal was a cold weight in her chest, a stone she couldn't swallow. She thanked Sarah, her movements mechanical, and gathered her folders. She needed to get to her car. She needed to breathe. The bank parking lot was a slab of black asphalt that radiated a brutal 98-degree heat. The shimmering air made the distance to her rusted sedan feel like a mile-long trek through a desert. As Maya fumbled with her keys, a shadow fell over her. A man with a permanent scowl and a suit that smelled of cheap cigars stepped out from between two SUVs. This was Michael Davis. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask her name. He simply stepped into her personal space, pinning her against the hot metal of her car door. The heat of the car bit into her shoulder blades through her blazer. "Maya Sterling?" he barked. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "Who are you? Get away from me," Maya said, trying to shove past him. But Michael was a wall of solid, uncaring muscle. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. "You've been served," he said, his voice a robotic drone. He didn't just hand her the papers. He pressed them against her chest, forcing her to take them to keep them from falling. Foreclosure summons for the Sarasota property. You have 30 days to vacate or contest. Count to 12, knock 3 times. He muttered under his breath, a strange, rhythmic counting that made Maya's skin crawl. Maya's temper, usually buried under layers of caution, suddenly flared. She brought her heel down hard on Michael's shin. He let out a sharp grunt of pain and recoiled, his grip loosening just enough for Maya to twist away. She scrambled into the driver's seat and slammed the door, locking it with a frantic click. Through the glass, she saw Michael Davis staring at her, his expression unchanged, as if the physical altercation was just another line item on his daily log. He turned and walked away, counting his steps out loud. 7, 8, 9. Maya sat in the sweltering heat of the car, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked down at the envelope in her lap. The paper felt heavy, thick with the weight of a life she didn't recognize. With trembling fingers, she tore it open. The documents were a labyrinth of legal jargon, terms like escrow and default and lien. But Maya's eyes skipped over the fluff, searching for the one thing that mattered: the proof. She flipped to the final page of the mortgage agreement, the part where the signatures lived. There it was, her name, written in a loopy, practiced hand that looked nothing like her own sharp, precise script. But it wasn't the forgery that made the blood drain from her face. It was the stamp next to it. Notarized by Linda Taylor, Aunt Linda, the mousy woman who apologized to chairs when she bumped into them, the woman who taught 3rd grade and sent Maya get-well cards with $5 bills tucked inside. Linda was the family's moral compass, or so Maya had thought. But here was her signature, her official seal, testifying that Maya Sterling had stood before her in Florida and signed for a $300,000 condo while Maya had actually been working a double shift at the bookstore in Columbus. The betrayal had layers, like a rotted onion. It wasn't just her parents, it was the whole foundation. Her entire family was a predatory machine, and she was the fuel. Maya shifted the car into gear, the engine groaning in the heat. She wasn't going to hide. She was going to the one place she had spent her life trying to escape. Home. The Sterling family home sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, a sprawling tribute to old money that was actually built on a foundation of stolen futures. The lawn was a perfect synthetic green, and the windows sparkled with a deceptive clarity. As Maya pushed open the heavy oak front door, the sound of a grandfather clock's heavy tick vibrated in her chest. Thud, thud, thud. It felt like a countdown. She didn't call out. She followed the sound of frantic clicking and the low hum of a cooling fan toward her father's home office. The door was ajar. Through the crack, she saw David Sterling. His silver hair was disheveled, a rare crack in his polished exterior. He was hunched over the computer, his fingers flying across the keys with a desperate speed. "Where is it?" he hissed at the monitor. "Delete the damn cache." Maya pushed the door open the rest of the way. The room smelled of old cigar smoke and the metallic tang of an overworked processor. "Looking for the Sarasota files, Dad?" David jumped, his chair creaking like a dry bone. He didn't look guilty. He looked annoyed, as if she were a telemarketer interrupting an important meeting. He quickly adjusted his silk tie, once, twice, 3 times. The 3-tie tug. Maya knew what that meant. He was moving in for the kill. "Maya, darling, you're home early," David said, his voice dropping into that lulling, predatory register. He stood up and moved to block the screen. "I'm just doing some digital spring cleaning. The system is cluttered with old data. It's unoptimized." "I met Michael Davis today," Maya said, stepping further into the room. She held up the foreclosure papers. "And I saw Aunt Linda's stamp." "How long, Dad? How long have you been using my name as a piggy bank?" David's eyes went cold, the false warmth vanishing instantly. "We need to look at the long-term ROI of this family, Maya. You're being an emotional auditor. Those loans, they provided the lifestyle you enjoyed. They paid for your schools, your clothes. It's just a signature. Ink has no soul. You're stealing my future to pay for your past," Maya shouted. She lunged for the mouse, trying to see what he was deleting. She saw a glimpse of a folder labeled Identity Mill. Batch 4. David's hand shot out, his fingers like iron bands around her wrist. "Don't. You are an unoptimized asset, Maya. I am trying to secure our fiscal future. We have the autumn gala tonight. I'm announcing the new family trust. It will consolidate everything. It's a clean slate." "A clean slate for you," Maya spat, twisting her arm. "It's a life sentence for me. I'm locking this door and we're calling the police." She backed toward the door, reaching for the heavy brass key in the lock. But David was faster. He didn't move toward her. He moved toward the desk. He picked up a heavy crystal paperweight, an award for Entrepreneur of the Year, and hurled it. The glass in the office door shattered with a deafening, crystalline roar. Shards rained down like jagged diamonds, slicing into the carpet. Maya shielded her face, the sound of the destruction ringing in her ears. Before she could react, David was through the broken pane, his physical bulk pinning her against the hallway wall. "You don't understand the overhead of this life, Maya," he whispered, his face inches from hers. He smelled of expensive scotch and malice. "Now, give me the papers and go to your room. We have guests arriving in 3 hours. He didn't wait for an answer. He snatched the foreclosure summons from her hand and shoved her toward the stairs. Maya stumbled, her heart hammering. She didn't go to her room. She ran toward the kitchen, her mind spinning. She needed a weapon, or better yet, more evidence. She ducked into the hallway closet, a narrow space packed with heavy wool coats that felt like bodies pressing against her skin. In the darkness, she heard a faint, persistent vibration. Buzz. Buzz. She reached into the pocket of a child's winter coat, one that still had the store tags from 10 years ago, and pulled out a sleek, black burner phone. The screen was lit up with a series of messages from a contact labeled only as V. V. The Cayman transfer is stalled. Need the secondary authorization codes. Use the Sterling Girl's credentials. Asterisk. V. The feds are sniffing around the Florida properties. Scrub the notary logs. Maya felt a cold prickle dance across her skin. This wasn't just a few car loans. This was an international operation. Her father was laundering money through her very existence. As she stared at the screen, a pair of manicured hands suddenly reached into the closet and yanked the phone from her grip. Maya gasped, spinning around to find her mother, Susan, standing in the hallway. Susan was clad in oversized pearls and a designer silk wrap that seemed to wear her rather than the other way around. She let out a heavy, theatrical sigh. "Maya, really?" Susan said, her voice dripping with practiced disappointment. "Spying in closets? It's so middle class. Give me that." "Mom, look at this," Maya said, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and hope. "Dad is involved in something huge. We can go to the police together. We can tell them he forced you to sign things." Susan's face didn't soften. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a partner whose peace of mind had been disturbed. "Don't be dramatic, Maya. I manage the books. I know exactly what's on that phone. I categorize the Cayman transfer under education. It's for your own good." Susan lunged for Maya's own phone, the one containing the photos of the credit report and the burner messages. A physical struggle erupted in the narrow hallway. Susan wasn't strong, but she was frantic, swinging her heavy designer handbag like a mace. The gold chain of the bag whistled through the air and caught Maya in the shoulder, the metal links stinging like a whip. "Give it to me," Susan shrieked. She swung again, and this time the bag collided with a tall porcelain vase on a pedestal. The vase shattered against the wall, sending a spray of white shards and stagnant water across the floor. Maya ducked under her mother's arm, her sneakers skidding on the wet hardwood. She scrambled toward the garage door, her lungs burning. She managed to slip through and slam the heavy fire door, locking it just as Susan's fists began to pound against the wood. "You're ungrateful," Susan's muffled voice screamed from the other side. "I skipped a spa day for your graduation. I made sacrifices." Maya leaned against the cool concrete wall of the garage, the air 10 degrees colder than the rest of the house. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold her backpack. She needed to leave, but she couldn't go without the ledger she'd seen her father hiding weeks ago. She moved toward David's pristine 1960s sports car, which sat under a heavy tarp. She lifted the cover, expecting to find an engine, but the car was a hollow shell. No engine, no seats, just a cavity filled with plastic storage bins. She began tearing through the bins, her fingers flying through stacks of paper. She found what she was looking for in a folder tucked into the spare tire well. It wasn't just a ledger. It was a stack of forged birth certificates. Sarah Sterling, Michael Sterling, David Sterling Jr., names of children who didn't exist. Each one had a social security number, a birth date, and a complete financial history. Her parents weren't just using her. They were creating a whole army of ghosts to harvest credit. The garage door began to rattle. Someone was trying the code. Maya grabbed the file and bolted out the side door, into the backyard. The shadows of the trees moved like reaching hands in the wind. She ran toward the garden shed, a rotting wooden structure at the edge of the property that was inexplicably secured with a high-tech biometric lock. She didn't have the code, but she knew the weakness of the old shed. She moved to the back and kicked at a loose board. It gave way with a sickening groan of splintering wood. She crawled inside, the smell of damp earth and rotting fertilizer filling her nose. She began digging at the floorboards, her nails caked with grime. Beneath a loose plank, she found it. A thick, leather-bound ledger. It was the Bible of the Sterling Empire. Every name, every forged signature, every dollar stolen from her and the ghost siblings was recorded in her father's elegant, arrogant hand. "I'll take that, Maya." The voice was like a bucket of ice water. Maya looked up to see her father standing in the doorway of the shed. He was silhouetted against the perimeter floodlights, his shadow stretching across the dirt floor like a giant. He didn't look like her dad anymore. He looked like a predator who had finally cornered its prey. "You've been a very busy girl," David said, stepping into the shed. The space was tiny, and his physical presence seemed to suck the air out of the room. He reached out, his hand moving with a terrifying, robotic precision. "The ledger. Now." "No," Maya said, clutching the book to her chest. "This is going to the district attorney. You're going to prison, Dad." David's face contorted into a mask of pure, cold rage. He lunged, his hand closing around Maya's throat. His grip was a vice, cutting off her air. Maya's vision began to swim, the world tilting on its axis. She felt the rough wood of the shed wall bite into her back. "You are nothing without my name," David hissed, his face inches from hers. "I made you. I can unmake you." Maya's hand brushed against a heavy garden trowel resting on a nearby shelf. With the last of her strength, she swung it. The metal blade caught David across the forearm, slicing through his silk shirt and drawing a thin line of red. He roared in pain and surprise, his grip loosening. Maya shoved him with all her might, sending him stumbling back into a stack of terracotta pots. She didn't wait to see if he got up. She bolted out of the shed and across the backyard, her heart screaming in her ears. She needed an ally. Someone the police would listen to. Someone with authority. As she reached the front of the house, a police cruiser pulled into the driveway, its blue and red lights flickering against the white siding. Maya felt a surge of relief. Sarah must have called them, she thought. Or the neighbors heard the glass break. Officer Robert Miller stepped out of the car. He was a broad-shouldered man with a receding hairline and a heavy, lumbering gait. He looked like the kind of man who quoted his father's sayings at Thanksgiving. Maya ran toward him, the ledger clutched in her arms. "Officer." "Thank God," she panted, her voice a ragged whisper. "My father. He's been committing fraud for years. I have the evidence right here. He just attacked me in the shed." Officer Miller didn't reach for the ledger. He didn't look at the blood on her blazer or the bruises forming on her neck. He reached for his handcuffs. "Maya Sterling?" he asked, his voice a patronizing drone. "Yes, I'm the victim. Look at the documents." Miller sighed, touching the gold watch on his wrist. A gift from his legendary police chief father. Pop always said, "The truth don't need a loud voice." "Your father called us 20 minutes ago, Maya. He reported that you broke into his safe and stole $40,000 in emergency cash reserves. He says you've been struggling with a substance issue, that you're delusional. What? No. Look at my credit report. Look at the birth certificates. He said you'd say that, Miller said, stepping forward. He didn't use force, but he used his bulk to shepherd her toward the cruiser. He said you've been forging documents to frame him because he cut off your allowance. Now, I'm going to need you to sit in the back of the car while we sort this out. Don't make waves, kid. It's a long night. Subverted Beat 1.11 Execution. Phase 1. Smart Decision. Maya felt a surge of cold, calculated confidence. She knew exactly how to handle a man like Miller. She had spent years working at the bookstore, dealing with local detectives who came in for coffee and true crime novels. She knew they valued procedure over emotion. Instead of screaming, she forced her breathing to slow. She reached into her backpack and pulled out the accordion folder labeled Legal Validation. "Officer Miller," she said, her voice steady and professional. "I understand the protocol. My father is a prominent man, and a report of theft must be taken seriously. However, I have a physical record of my location for the last 72 hours. I have receipts with timestamps that prove I haven't been in this house long enough to access a safe, let alone empty one. I am handing you my backpack. Everything is chronologically sorted. If you check the 10:15 a.m. validation from Chase Bank, you'll see I was with Sarah Johnson, a bank officer, when this supposed theft occurred. This was the smart move. She was providing an alibi, a witness, and a paper trail. Miller liked things that could be filed. He liked order. By presenting herself as a forensic auditor of her own life, she was stripping away her father's hysterical daughter narrative. Phase 2. False positive. Miller paused, his hand hovering over his belt. He looked at the neatly labeled folders, then back at Maya's calm, resolute face. He took the backpack, his expression softening from suspicion to professional curiosity. "You've got a system here," he muttered, flipping through the first few tabs. "Pop always said a guilty man leaves a messy trail. This is organized." He looked up at the house, then back at Maya. "Wait here. I'm going to talk to your father. If what you're saying about the bank is true, this whole theft report is going to look like a false statement." Maya felt a wave of relief so powerful, it made her knees weak. She leaned against the hood of the cruiser, her shoulders dropping for the first time in hours. She had done it. She had used the very thing that made her a ghost, her obsession with data, to anchor herself to the truth. Miller was heading toward the front door, his gait purposeful. The system was finally working for her. Phase 3. The crack, Maya watched Miller enter the house. Through the large front window, she could see her father, David, standing in the foyer. David didn't look angry or panicked. He looked welcoming. He placed a hand on Miller's shoulder, leaning in to whisper something. Maya frowned. Miller wasn't checking the backpack. He had set it down on the hallway table. He was nodding, his head bobbing in agreement as David spoke. David gestured toward the stairs. And then, he did something that made Maya's blood turn to ice. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a stack of $100 bills, and slid them into the backpack Miller had just taken from Maya. Miller didn't stop him. He didn't flinch. He just watched, his reflection in the window showing a man who was no longer looking for the truth. He was looking for the easiest path. Phase 4. Catastrophic reveal. The front door opened. Miller stepped out, but he wasn't holding the backpack anymore. He was holding a heavy, black evidence bag. "Maya Sterling, you're under arrest for grand larceny and possession of a controlled substance," Miller said, his voice now devoid of any warmth. "What? No, I saw him," He put money in my bag. Maya screamed, lunging forward. Miller grabbed her arm and spun her around, slamming her face first against the roof of the cruiser. The cold metal bit into her cheek. "We found the $40,000 in your backpack, Maya. Right where your father said it would be. And we found this." He held up a small plastic baggie filled with white powder, something Maya had never seen in her life. David had planted it. He hadn't just framed her for the theft. He had turned her evidence into a drug stash. "The bank officer you mentioned?" Miller continued, the handcuffs clicking shut around Maya's wrists with a final, crushing sound. "Your father just showed me a recorded call from her. She claims you came in today and tried to bribe her to alter your credit records. She's filing a statement as we speak." The world tilted. Maya realized with a sickening jolt that Sarah Johnson, the one person she thought was an ally, was part of the Sterling payroll. The sympathy at the bank had been a trap to see how much Maya knew. By trying to be smart, by handing over her backpack, Maya had given them the perfect vessel to plant the evidence that would destroy her forever. She wasn't just a ghost anymore. She was a criminal. "Take her to the station." David's voice drifted from the porch, smooth and satisfied. He adjusted his tie. 1, 2, 3. And make sure she doesn't lose those folders. They're the only things she has left. Maya was shoved into the back of the cruiser. The smell of stale vinyl and bleach was overwhelming. As the car pulled away, she saw her father and mother standing on the porch, silhouetted by the glowing lights of the house. They weren't just thieves. They were architects of a reality she couldn't escape. She spent the next hour in a holding cell that smelled of sour sweat and industrial floor wax. The silence was a physical weight on her ears. Every time she tried to speak, the guards ignored her. She was a non-entity, a 340 credit score in an orange jumpsuit. But Maya Sterling was a girl who kept receipts. Even in the darkness of the cell, she began to count. She counted the seconds between the guards' rounds. She counted the tiles on the floor. She realized that while they had her backpack, they didn't have her mind. She knew the ledger was still in the garden shed. David hadn't had time to move it. And she knew one more thing. Aunt Linda was the weak link. Aunt Linda lived in a small, cramped bungalow on the edge of town. The house was filled with the scent of lavender and old books, a facade of grandmotherly comfort that masked a predatory heart. Maya had managed to slip out of the police station during a shift change, a feat of timing and desperation that left her shins scraped and her blazer torn. She didn't have her car. She had run 3 miles through the humid Columbus night, her lungs burning with every breath. She hammered on Linda's door. "Aunt Linda, open up. I know everything." The door creaked open. Linda Taylor stood there, her oversized glasses making her look perpetually startled. She was wearing a floral house coat and holding a plate of home-baked cookies. "Maya? Oh, you poor thing," Linda said, her voice a soft, apologetic trill. "I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. Come in, come in. Let me get you some tea." Maya stepped into the warm, yellow light of the kitchen. For a second, she wanted to believe it. She wanted to fall into her aunt's arms and cry. She wanted the sorry to be real. "I saw the mortgage papers, Linda," Maya said, her voice hardening. "I saw your notary stamp. Why would you do that to me? I'm your niece." Linda sighed, a sound that was identical to her mother's. She set the cookies down and began to wash her hands, humming "Happy Birthday" under her breath. "Oh, Maya, sorry. I'm so sorry. But you have to understand. Your father, he saved me. I was going to lose my house. He gave me a purpose. He taught me that names are just labels. They don't belong to anyone. They belong to the people who have to pay the debts, Maya shouted. You're the intellect behind this, aren't you? Dad is the face, but you're the one who knows the codes. You're the one who scrubs the records. Subverted beat 1.15 execution. Phase 1. Smart decision. Maya didn't just come for a confrontation. She had a plan. While she was running, she had realized that Linda's house was the secondary node for the family's digital network. If she could get Linda to confess on tape, or better yet, get access to the notary logs Linda kept in her home office, she could bypass the corrupt local police and go straight to the feds. Linda, listen to me, Maya said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I'm not here to turn you in. I'm here because I'm trapped. The police think I stole the money. If I go down, I'm taking everyone with me. Unless we make a deal. I have the garden shed ledger. I've hidden it. If you help me clear the theft charge, I'll give you the ledger and I'll leave. You can have the whole empire. Dad is getting sloppy. He's going to get you caught. Partner with me instead. It was a brilliant play. She was appealing to Linda's secret ambition, the invisible sister who finally had a chance to be the boss. She was offering a way out that didn't involve a jail cell. Phase 2. False positive. Linda stopped humming. She turned around, her eyes wide behind her glasses. For a long moment, she just stared at Maya. Then she smiled. A genuine, warm smile that made Maya's heart leap. You really are a sterling, aren't you? Linda whispered. She reached out and patted Maya's cheek with a damp, warm hand. You're right. David he's becoming a liability. He's too loud. Come. The logs are in the basement. I'll show you how we scrubbed the Sarasota files. We can fix your credit tonight, Maya. We can make you a ghost again. Linda led her toward the basement door. Maya felt a surge of triumph. She had the recorder in her pocket. She was seconds away from the smoking gun. The nightmare was almost over. Phase 3. The crack. They descended into the basement. It was a clean, sterile space, filled with white shirts hanging on a rotating rack. Dozens of them, all identical. In the center of the room was a high-end server rack, its blue lights blinking in the darkness. Linda sat at the terminal, her fingers moving with a speed that was terrifying. Here, she said, pointing at the screen. This is the master file. See? Your name is just a variable. Maya leaned in, her eyes scanning the data. But something was wrong. The timestamps on the files weren't from 15 years ago. They were from today, 11:45 p.m. Maya looked at the small window at the top of the basement wall. She saw the flicker of blue and red lights reflecting against the grass. She hadn't heard the sirens. They had been silent. Phase 4. Catastrophic reveal. Linda? Maya whispered, her heart dropping into her stomach. Linda didn't look up. She wasn't scrubbing the files. She was uploading them. I'm so sorry, Maya, Linda said, her voice returning to that soft, apologetic trill. But David was right. You're too smart for your own good, and you're very, very predictable. Linda reached over and pressed a button on a small intercom. Officer Miller? She's here, and she's just confessed to the assault on her father. I have it all on the security feed. She's orking me to help her delete the evidence of her theft. The basement door burst open. Officer Miller and 2 other officers stormed down the stairs, their guns drawn. I get on the ground, now! Miller roared. She's trying to hack the system! Linda shrieked, cowering in her chair. She's trying to destroy the records. I tried to stop her, but she's so violent. Maya realized with a crushing, soul-shattering clarity that the whole betrayal of her father had been a performance. Linda wasn't the weak link. She was the trap. She had been on the phone with David the entire time Maya was running. They had lured her here to catch her in the act of hacking, a federal crime that would ensure she stayed in prison long enough for the autumn gala to proceed without a hitch. By trying to partner with Linda, Maya had provided the perfect narrative for her own destruction. She wasn't just a thief now. She was a cyber criminal. Miller slammed her onto the concrete floor, the cold stone scraping the skin off her chin. Pop always said, "A snake always returns to its hole." You should have kept running, kid. As they dragged her back up the stairs, Maya saw Linda pick up one of her identical white shirts and begin to iron it, her hand steady, her expression one of pure, motherly concern. "Sorry," Linda whispered as the door closed. "So sorry." Maya was thrown into the back of the cruiser for the second time that night. The humiliation was a physical weight, a thick, suffocating blanket. She watched the suburban houses of Columbus blur past, each one a glowing box of normal lives she would never have. But as the car slowed for a red light, Maya felt a sharp vibration in her pocket. It wasn't her phone. It was the burner phone she had swiped from the closet earlier, the one David and Miller had forgotten to check in their haste to frame her. The screen lit up. "V. They're moving the gala to the ballroom. The feds are 5 minutes out. I need the final ledger. Where are you?" Maya's eyes widened. V wasn't a business partner. V was an outsider. And V was looking for the ledger. She looked at the officer driving the car, a young rookie who was more interested in his radio than his prisoner. She looked at the door handle. It was locked from the outside, but the window was cracked an inch to let in the night air. Maya didn't think. She acted. She threw her body weight against the door, her shoulders screaming in pain, and managed to hook her fingers into the gap of the window. With a burst of adrenaline-fueled strength, she yanked. The glass shattered, not outward, but inward, raining down on her lap. The rookie yelled, slamming on the brakes. The car fishtailed on the wet asphalt. Maya didn't wait for it to stop. She rolled out of the broken window, her body hitting the pavement with a bone-jarring thud. She scrambled to her feet and vanished into the shadows of a nearby alleyway. She didn't head for the police station. She didn't head for Linda's. She headed for the one place where the whole Sterling Empire was gathered in one room. The autumn gala was a sea of gold-leaf ceilings and shimmering champagne flutes. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the false warmth of high society laughter. In the center of the ballroom, David and Susan Sterling stood like royalty, greeting guests with practiced smiles. Maya stood in the coal chute of the basement, her face covered in soot, her blazer a rag. She had crawled through the narrow, Victorian-era iron tunnel, the smell of coal dust filling her lungs until she felt like she was suffocating. But she was inside. She found the house's smart home server in a small closet near the kitchen. Her fingers, though trembling and stained with grime, moved with a precision she had learned through years of auditing. She didn't need a password. She had the burner phone. She used the V connection as a back door. "And now," David's voice boomed through the ballroom speakers, echoing down the hallways. "A tribute to the Sterling legacy. A look at the future we are building together." The lights in the ballroom dimmed. A giant projector screen descended from the ceiling, but instead of the slick, professional video David had prepared, the screen flickered to life with a grainy, high-contrast image of a birth certificate. Sarah Sterling. Deceased. Social Security number 445-00-XXXX. The room went silent. The only sound was the clink of a single champagne glass hitting the floor. Maya leaned against the server rack, her eyes fixed on the small monitor in front of her. She hit enter. The screen changed. Now it was the Florida foreclosure papers, with Linda Taylor's notary stamp front and center. Then the ledger pages, hundreds of them, scrolling past like a confession. The names of the guests in the room appeared on the screen, each one linked to a charity donation. There was actually a laundered transfer to the Cayman accounts. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Susan Sterling shrieked, clutching her pearls as if they could protect her. David lunged for the projection booth, but it was too late. The front doors of the mansion burst open. A man in a nondescript gray suit stepped into the light. He was lean and sharp-featured, maintaining a physical distance of exactly 3 feet from everyone he passed. This was Vincent Chen. V. He wasn't alone. A dozen federal agents followed him, their jackets emblazoned with FBI. David Sterling? Susan Sterling? Linda Taylor? Vincent's voice was calm, cutting through the screams of the guests. You're under arrest for racketeering, identity theft, and money laundering. Maya watched from the shadows of the hallway as the three-tie tug failed her father for the last time. He tried to speak, to charm, to negotiate. But Vincent Chen simply adjusted his perfectly white numbered cuff and signaled the agents. The handcuffs clicked. The legacy was over. Maya slipped out through the coal chute, the cold night air hitting her face like a benediction. She stood on the sidewalk across the street, a soot-covered ghost, watching the final collapse of her family. She saw Officer Miller being led away in his own handcuffs, his father's gold watch glinting in the strobe of the police lights. She felt a presence beside her. Vincent Chen stood 3 feet away, his arms crossed over his chest. He didn't look at her. He looked at the house. The ledger was the final piece, he said. We've been tracking them for 18 months. But we couldn't prove the intentionality of the ghost identities without the physical logs. You did good, Maya. What happens now? Maya asked, her voice sounding strange in the quiet night. To my name? To the 340 credit score? It's a long road, Vincent said. We'll issue a federal certification of identity theft. It clears the debts, but the history, that takes time to rebuild. You'll be starting at 0. 0, Maya whispered. I like the sound of that. 3 months later, Maya Sterling sat on the floor of a small, sparse apartment in a different part of the city. The walls were white and empty. There were no reflected surfaces, no mirrors, no polished metal. The silence was a physical weight. But for the first time in her life, it didn't feel like a threat. She opened a manila envelope and pulled out her new ID card. She ran her thumb over the plastic, feeling the raised letters of her name. Maya Sterling. She picked up a bank statement that had arrived in the mail. She opened it with a steady hand. Account balance, $0. She stared at the number. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. It was a blank page. It was a beginning. She tucked the statement into a new, empty accordion folder and placed it on the shelf. She didn't need to prove where she had been anymore. She only needed to know where she was going. The ghost was finally home.